I'd like to introduce you to Dorian Gray. They're an activist working towards halting ICE expansion in Colorado and is the founder of No Concentration Camps in Colorado. Dorian, go for it.
Okay. I'm gonna share screen. Got a little presentation. There we go. Let's see. Share. Can you guys see that screen?
Yep. Yep.
Wonderful. Yeah, so hi, I'm Dorian. I founded a coalition called No Concentration Camps in Colorado, that's focused on ICE detention. This is a little presentation that I've made about why we use that name and a little bit about our campaign. So, Donald Trump and the Republican Party have built a political platform of fear by scapegoating immigrants in America as a threat to national security, a drain on the US economy, the source of crime in America, and the reason America is no longer great. This comes through the spreading of misinformation, including fictional gang takeovers of apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado, fictional horror stories of immigrants eating pets, driven by racism and xenophobia. This has caused a culture of fear and xenophobia within the hearts of many Americans, and an us versus them mentality of real Americans or people who immigrated in the right way versus illegals. The current administration has used this to justify rapid, sweeping changes to governing under the guise of protection. Through a series of executive orders that bypass our legal and legislative systems, the current administration has weaponized our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency into a secret police force, giving them broad authority to hunt and detain immigrants living in America without the benefit of due process or indictment. Capitalizing on the blind loyalty of the Republican Party to a unitary executive, the Trump administration passed a bill that funded ICE with an additional $45 billion in taxpayer dollars to expand its detention infrastructure. ICE doesn't actually run prisons, though, in the same way that the FBI doesn't run prisons. Most of the detention facilities that ICE uses and contracts with are run by three companies: CoreCivic, the Geo Group, and the Baptiste Group. These countries are for profit and they run these detention facilities for profit. The goal of these detention facilities is to increase their profits and increase the profits of their shareholders. The US federal government under Donald Trump has allocated $45 billion of taxpayer dollars to expand its detention infrastructure. So a private prison company like Geo, CoreCivic, or Baptiste then receives a per diem per detainee fee in accordance to the contract with the US federal government to house people detained by ICE. And in order to generate a profit, that private prison company's goals then are to house as many detainees as possible for as long as possible at the lowest possible cost and with the fewest possible staff. This incentivizes private prisons to provide inadequate conditions for both detainees and workers. Trump has facilitated and commanded that exploitation through the use of executive orders. Now, an executive order, it differs from a different kind of from legislation in the sense that this is just a command given by the president to do something. So by broadening detention and ICE enforcement through those executive orders, Donald Trump's presidential orders target immigrants for detention who may otherwise be in the United States legally or are otherwise cooperating peacefully with immigration courts, but now their legal status has been revoked. Um, I'm seeing the chat pop up. Okay, I'm gonna put this over here because otherwise it will bother me to see the number. Wonderful. Um, so expansions to expedited removals have oh, I'm messing things up. Oh, I'm not good at this. Well, there we are. And we were here. All right. So we've brought in detention and ICE enforcement, making people who were legal suddenly no longer legal. And expansions to expedited removals by Executive Order 14159 gives ICE the power to detain and remove non-citizens without due process of a court hearing. Executive Order 14160, protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship, while presently under litigation, seeks to change the legal status of citizens of the United States who immigrated here from another country by ending birthright citizenship. And Donald Trump's gold card executive order further exploits immigrants by offering a backdoor to legal visa status for foreign nationals willing to make a large enough financial gift to the U.S. federal government. So, targeted by identity and status. ICE enforcement has largely focused on people of Latin American, Asian, or Middle Eastern descent. Stories from activists and detainees report being targeted for speaking Spanish or another language other than English, and many immigrants have learned to keep their identification that proves their legal status on hand, sort of a papers, please moment. Many detained are people who are seeking asylum or relief. They're held because of their present immigration status, not because of criminality. The Human Rights Watch emphasizes that immigration detention is being applied broadly, including people cooperating with immigration process, and that committing a crime is not necessary for indefinite administrative detention. Many outspoken activists have been detained, including Jeanette Visquetta, who has lived in the Denver area for decades and was declared one of Time magazine's top 100 influential people during Donald Trump's last term in office.
We can't hear it.
Oh, you can't? Oh,
No, when you
no.
share in Zoom, there's like an extra checkbox to share your sound.
Got it.
So,
Well, that
yeah.
was the Denver mayor equating Jeanette Visquetta's detention by ICE to the Putin style, actually, I think he said Soviet, to the Soviet style persecution of political dissidents under the guise of immigration enforcement. These facilities are, by definition, concentration camps. The Encyclopedia of Britannica defines concentration camp as an internment center for political prisoners and members of national or minority groups who are confined for reasons of state security, exploitation, or punishment, usually by executive decree or military order. Persons are placed in such camps often on the basis of identification with a particular ethnic or political group, rather than as individuals and without benefit of either indictment or fair trial. This is not hyperbole. A look at Aurora's concentration camp, the current ICE detention facility in Aurora. Over 70% of the detainees in the Geo Group owned ICE detention center in Aurora, Colorado, have not been charged with any crime. These detention statistics are pulled directly from ICE's website. At ice.gov/detention, you can go and actually see all of their detention statistics that they release in the form of spreadsheets. We've gone and done some analytics on those and found that 70% rough population is non-criminal population. Less than 5% of the detainees at the Aurora ICE Detention Center have any history of violence, including while being detained. They issue a threat level for detainees, and 95% of the detainees at the Aurora ICE Detention Center have no threat level, meaning they're not at risk of violence. They've never committed any violent act. They're not expected to commit any violent act. They have not committed any crime that has violence attached to it, possibly a speeding ticket. Um, Detainees there report nightmare conditions, including a severe lack of medical care. One story that sticks out to me is of a woman who came to the United States seeking asylum. She was detained in Aurora and she got a tooth infection, and they refused her access to a dentist. So, in her cell, she extracted her own tooth, and the other detainees there helped her with the gore and mess that ensued. Detainees are forced into a reliance on commissary, paid out of their own pockets or from their families' pockets to avoid starvation due to the inadequate nutritional services there. Um, and then there's a case right now, a class action lawsuit that represents 60,000 people. Menacall et al. Versus Geo Group that is at the Supreme Court level right now. The Geo Group is alleged to be enforcing slave labor of detainees at their Aurora facility under threat of solitary confinement. They're forced to perform labor in those facilities so that they can reduce their staffing costs. They're paid as little as $1 a day or not paid at all. In our research, we found 316 instances of solitary confinement at the Aurora ICE Detention Center in fiscal year 2025. The language we use to describe these sites and the language that we use when we talk about the rise of fascism in America matters. Using words like prison or detention center sanitizes the reality of the situation. It makes it easier for the average person to justify what ICE and private prison contractors are doing when we create purpose-built words for them. It's not an understatement that the word concentration camp carries with it a lot of weight, but it names the system for what it is. It's important to remember that the concentration camps used in Nazi Germany began as deportation camps. Their goal was the forced removal of national minorities and political dissidents that they felt were a drain on their economy and a source of crime. If we can't call things what they are, and we stigmatize them in a way that censors our speech in a he who must not be named type way, we make it very difficult to recognize when those dangerous and traumatizing things return. So Donald Trump wants Colorado to be his prison colony. Tiffany said at the head of the call that there are 6 new sites planned in Colorado, new concentration camps. The ACLU, on July 9th of 2025, the ACLU of Colorado published their findings from a FOIA lawsuit against ICE. They asked ICE, "What are your plans to expand in Colorado?" And ICE said, "We're not telling you." And so they sued and they won. Those findings were published and they unveiled plans for at least 6 new privately owned for-profit concentration camps in Colorado. We're looking at Walsenburg, Hudson, La Junta, Colorado Springs, and then there has been some toss up about Burlington and Ignacio as well. Within Springs, there's 2 facilities that plan to be opened. Um, Cheyenne Mountain Detention Center and the Colorado Springs Migrant Detention Facility. The Cheyenne Mountain Center is owned by the same company that owns the one in Aurora, Geo. The Baptiste Group, which is focused on the Colorado Springs Migrant Detention Facility, is a children's facility. It's a former boys' camp. And I would like to note that Baptiste Group lost their detention contract in Tennessee for a migrant children's facility due to repeated reports of sexual assault of the children by staff. La Junta, there is a facility there, Hudson and Walsenburg. They're also looking at potential soft-sided facilities in Walsenburg and Hudson, similar to the infamous alligator Alcatraz, or similar to the Amanchi concentration camp that existed in Colorado during World War II for Japanese immigrants. So, in response, I began reaching out to other activists, and I found many that were willing to take the call to action. I started reaching out first on Reddit. This are some Reddit posts that I had made, and we launched our campaign there. We began building a grassroots coalition of activists, organizations, and community leaders that seek to form a united front against for-profit ICE detention centers in Colorado. We have 5 demands that our coalition is united behind, and that is no further expansion of ICE detention infrastructure in Colorado, closure of the ICE detention facility in Aurora, divestment from private prison contracts, reinvestment into housing, education, healthcare, and other social services, and an immediate response to all demands from Colorado's elected officials. At present, our coalition is cut off at the bottom here because I'm not good at this. And but our coalition is currently CIRC, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, the Immigrant Protection Teams of Colorado, 5051 Colorado, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Solidarity Warriors, the General Strike US, Indivisible, and the Denver Communists. It started very small. We organized a small protest at the Capitol, marched to the governor's mansion. We got our messaging out using social media. On social media, I began encouraging people to spam Jared Polis's comment sections with no concentration camps in Colorado, demanding that he make a statement about the ACLU findings. I started posting a daily reminder about it every day at 10:30 a.m. And we encourage people to create memes and art because it takes longer to scroll through 50 images than it does to scroll through 50 lines of text. These are some of my favorite standouts. I really like the banana sticker. That's a good one. But we began canvassing at protests and political events. By July 17th, for the Good Trouble protest, we had solidified our messaging and demands and put a canvassing team together to approach organizers as campaign ambassadors and invite them into coalition with us. We emphasized that this is an impossible task with such a small group of local activists, and we called on them to join us in our campaign. Created a flyer, brought them everywhere, even dropped them off in the governor's mansion. The coalition grew very quickly, seemingly overnight, as more and more organizations joined our cause. We made a public statement to Governor Polis, signed by over a dozen political organizations in the form of a hand-delivered letter that we brought to his office. We unfortunately didn't get the dramatic moment of slamming it on his desk. We handed it to a staffer, Arlo, and we're in communications with bringing him to the table. But as of today, September 24th, 2025, Jared Polis has yet to make any public statement about the 6 new concentration camps. And we need to bring our elected officials to the table on this. These ICE facilities are largely proposed in rural and remote areas, and that is by design. Protests formed locally and organically in those locations, but they struggled due to the impact that low turnout can cause to a protest. And, there's not a lot of people out there, so the turnout's always going to be a little bit low. It also has opened up protesters in Walsenburg to repeated political violence from counter protesters. So coalition members, Indivisible, PSL, and IPT, organized caravans to Walsenburg and Hudson in order to support local effort and to showcase statewide solidarity and resistance against the proposed new concentration camps. Our calls to action presently, I would love to approach Phil Weiser. If someone can get Phil Weiser to say no concentration camps in Colorado on camera, I will love you forever. Our calls to action presently are to convince our elected officials that they must resist the opening of any additional ICE detention centers in Colorado. Demand the closure of the for-profit ICE detention center in Aurora and keep this conversation at the front of public consciousness. We must talk about this publicly. We must talk about it with your friends and your family. We must emphasize that we must not turn away or bury our heads in the sand. And we must emphasize what these detention centers are and the real threat that they pose. We must show the world that Colorado does not want to be Trump's prison colony. I encourage you to support any legislation that divests from detention and invests in social needs, especially rural social needs, and to join our coalition and help our cause. This effort is going to require a diversity of tactics from every person, and every person in every organization has some skill that they can bring to the table. The contact page of our website, nocampscolorado.org, can be used to contact us. We are actively seeking to expand our coalition. We are calling on any activists, organizers, and community leaders to get in touch with us. We must be unified and working together collaboratively and transparently in order to be successful in this mission. And that's all I've got for you. I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker. If anybody has any questions for me, I guess you could raise hands.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do questions for Dorian now, and then we'll have Laura give her presentation. I saw a lot of people wanting to find out, what they can do. So if you click on the link in the chat that says no concentration camps in Colorado website, go to the contact page and get in touch. You can become part of the coalition as well. Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you. On the list I have, and it might be outdated, it said that the Baptiste group was one of those groups.
It was, yeah.
And
it is.
Isn't that the group who had their license suspended in Tennessee?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because of inappropriate sexual contact with minors?
With children. Yeah, at a children. Yeah. And what they propose to open in Colorado Springs is to reopen the boys camp in Colorado Springs, which is owned by the Baptiste group, into a migrant children's facility.
So is there someone had put in the chat, is there some kind of form letter we could use to contact Weiser and Polis that has some of these facts listed?
We have a lot of these facts listed on our website, nocampscolorado.org. If you would like to help put together a form letter, we can definitely add that to the website. I can't stress enough how little I know what I'm doing. And so I just started it. And everybody's been a really great help in this effort. And I think that if we all put our heads together, we can absolutely find more ways that we can resist.
Thank you.
Dorian, can you put the letter that you wanted to deliver to Phil Weiser on your website, or a link to it that people can copy and then
absolutely.
email it?
It's right here. This is the letter we hand delivered. Yep. And it's got all the signatures. That's the one that went to Polis. That's the one that we hand delivered. If we got some sort of form together if we got some kind of form together on the website that would allow people to submit like their own comments to elected officials, that would probably be pretty useful. I'm a software engineer. I'm savvy with the forms on the websites. Could definitely use help from other UI engineers. It's not really my forte.
Once I get some time, I can definitely try to help out with that. Deborah in the chat said, has Colorado been singled out for the concentration camps? Do we know how many of them have been created in the country or are planned for the country?
Unfortunately, no. And ICE has been purposefully very opaque about their plans for expansion. The only reason that Colorado has so much information on it right now is because the ACLU of Colorado brought that lawsuit to ICE. And there might be more information on other states, and I might just be ignorant of them because I'm so hyper-focused on what's going on in Colorado.
And just before we get to you, Cynthia, I want to address the question that the user called iPhone put in the chat, which was, how is this fiscally responsible? What are the costs compared to the benefits of imprisonment? And actually, that's what our next speaker, Laura, is going to address. So we will get to her after we take a couple more questions. Cynthia, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. What I wanted to know is, are they targeting legalized naturalized citizens as well?
Well, so it's hard to say because people who are in different steps of the immigration process, which is a really long process, can suddenly become detained because of the broadening of ICE's enforcement ability. They can detain people who are presently trying to seek asylum, presently in the asylum seeking process, maybe in contact with the courts. People are being arrested at immigration courts. And there is also a zero tolerance policy that's been applied for if you've committed any crime. And this includes some civil infractions like a speeding ticket. So, say you get a speeding ticket and you've been living in the country for 40 years. And it takes a long time to get citizenship. And there is a story of a gentleman that the ACLU wrote about in a publication called "The Cost of Cruel" or "Cashing in on Cruelty: Stories of Death and Abuse at the Aurora Immigration Facility." That's a really good. Maybe we could throw that link in there. But there's a story in there of a man who came to this country, was living here for 40 years as a legal resident, um, got in some trouble with drug addiction, which happens, to people sometimes, and it's a terrible thing. And they brought him to the detention facility, refused his prescribed uh, medication for his withdrawals, and he died there. So it doesn't necessarily matter when they're changing the rules so much. There's a new executive order that's been placed that's under litigation that targets people who have H-1B visas and are working in this country and they're non-citizens. And it's rejecting them from being able to re-enter this country in any way. So yes and no. At present, they are targeting non-citizens. That does not necessarily mean non-naturalized citizens. It just means people who haven't completed the citizenship process.
But they're basically not targeting people who have completed that process, have been naturalized for many years.
They are. I'll put to that example again of the gentleman who was here for 40 years before ICE picked him up, and then he died in detention.
Oh, and he was naturalized.
Yeah,
Wow.
he'd been here for a
Wow.
long time. Jeanette Visquera, for example, she'd been in the process of trying to get citizenship for decades. And the city knew about her, the state knew about her. She was protected in Colorado, and Colorado said, "Yes, you are a resident of this city, of this state." And the federal government came in, overstepped those boundaries, and arrested her and detained her anyway. And our senators have both spoken out about that. Our governor actually spoke out when Jeanette Visquera was kidnapped. Our mayor, that's who he was describing when he called it the Soviet-style persecution of political dissidents.
Thank you.
Of course.
Morgan, do you see any other questions in the chat? I'm just answering someone right now.
No, I saw that Dana from IPT said check out the Detention Watch Network. Check out the Detention Watch Network. They're also calling for organizers right now with a deadline of October 10th to organize a Dia de los Muertos event on November 1st.
I don't see. Well, somebody had asked, how do we stop the ICE recruitment ads? And how that's a waste of money. I'm not sure there is a way that we can do that. Do you have any ideas?
I mean, we have to show how unpopular it is. I feel like Colorado natives Matt and Trey did a great job with the way that they're portraying ICE in South Park right now. And we need to keep that mentality of showing that this is unpopular, because that's going to keep networks from running ads for it and wasting their time on it.
I think another thing that you can do is contact other advertisers on the station and tell them you're boycotting their products if they continue to advertise on that station because they're airing ICE recruitment ads, and then send an email to the station and tell them what you're doing.
That's a great idea. Also, Dorian, I want to thank you. We have a lot of people from all over the country, in addition to just in Colorado. And I like how both the questions and your information connect some of the stuff that's happening in Colorado in a way that can apply to other places. Because I'm pretty sure that the 6 detention facilities in Colorado aren't going to be the only ones. The
No.
question I have is, and it's more a comment, I heard someone say that the facility they're planning in Hudson, but all of these facilities in particular, their plan is to bring people from all over the country, bring them in to the extent that they get due process and a trial. If they are found to be here legally and not guilty of any crimes, they will just be turned out on the street from the detention facility with no way to get back home, and then become a problem for Colorado, particularly if they become homeless.
Yep. There's a very good documentary by More Perfect Union, and it's called How ICE Detentions Make Private Prison CEOs Richer. It really goes into detail about Leavenworth in Kansas, and also in Louisiana, a facility there. This is a nationwide issue. I'm hyper focused on Colorado because I live here and I'm tired, and I can't take on the whole country, but this is absolutely a nationwide issue, and I did see that there is a no concentration camps in Nevada that formed as well. The name of the documentary is How ICE Detentions Make Private Prison CEOs Richer, but that is the YouTube link that I threw in, and yep.
One more thing to kind of tie some things together. All of this money that's being appropriated to ICE is part of the $3 trillion hole the big, beautiful bill put in our deficit. The second one that Donald Trump has already done, because he did one in his first administration. But if you think back to what we were talking about next week, for all of the people that were fired and Doge cuts and all of that stuff, it is a drop in the bucket just compared to this appropriation for ICE. And the idea that they are cutting money to save the budget somehow really is a complete lie when they are turning around and taking money to do this. It really was about making people suffer.
Certainly. I like to give an example a lot of times that if you took um if you took the 45 first people, so the first people who ever were the first human beings, and you took every single one of them in North Africa, and then they started working from the day they were born until, we're assuming they live forever, 9/24/2025, and they made $1 million every single day, then you'd still be a few $1 million short of the amount of money that ICE has been given by the federal government. Like, this is an amount of money that is impossible to realize in your head. Signature Aviation still transporting deportees. I am not sure on deportee transportation. If anybody from Solidarity Warriors maybe wants to chime in, if you know.
I'm
that
not
the letter-
100% sure, but I do know they're based out of Colorado Springs, I think. So
Yeah,
there's certainly some things we can organize there. So let me do a little research real quick.
it's a good point.
All
Dana.
right, Dana, this will be
Yeah.
our last question
Dana
for
probably
Dorian.
knows. That's probably not a
No,
question.
Oh,
just
your answer. Krista.
Yeah, just real quick. Signature Aviation is not an airline. Signature Aviation are fixed-based operators which fuel and service private and chartered aircraft at airports across our country. And we have a Signature Aviation at DIA or at our airport that services 4 to 5 different airlines that come through that are picking up and taking detainees out. So stay tuned. There is a national campaign against Signature Aviation that the Party for Socialism and Liberation may be involved with. So just stay tuned. And if you go to groundice.org, you can read about the Signature
Throw that in the
Aviation.
chat real
That'd be
quick.
great. Okay.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. And then if there's still questions for Dorian, I'm not sure if you're able to stick around until later, but we can open it up to questions for both
I can
speakers.
stick around for a little while longer here.
Okay, great. So our next speaker is Laura. She's going to talk us through the negative economic impacts of private prisons and the cost of allowing ICE to open 6 new concentration camps in Colorado. Laura, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm Laura Nelson. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight to be able to talk about a really important and timely subject. I have been working with Dorian and Dorian's group, and recently I have joined IPT, so I'm doing some work over there. In terms of background, I'm a former Air Force officer, government contractor, and teacher. I wanted to talk a little bit before I jump into the presentation. There were some questions about what's going on nationally. And mid-August, there was an article that came out that really covered a lot of what's going on nationally. So if anybody has questions, that article, Washington Post did it, yeah. I believe it was August 14th, 2025. Washington Post did a whole breakdown on this. They did every state, they did every single detention center that is planned that ICE is looking at. So anybody that has questions on this, they have charts, they have graphs, they have exactly how many beds are going to be allocated per state. So please look up that article. If you can't find it, drop me an email. I will get it to you. It's a really important resource. And as of that article, Colorado really is facing the opening of 3 centers. They did some fantastic reporting in that article. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and we're going to jump into the economics that I wanted to cover tonight. So hopefully you can see that.
We can see it.
Okay, great. Okay. Tonight, I will be speaking on the economic impact of prisons on communities. Specifically, I will be looking at a lot of things about Walsenburg and making comments about Walsenburg. But really, if you're in another state and you are facing the opening of a defunct prison and it's going to open under the auspices of ICE, this is for you. You can see below my contact information. If you have any follow-up questions or if I can help in any way, go ahead and contact me, and you'll see my contact information is tied to my author name, Ellis Nelson. So don't let that throw you. I am the same person. Okay, this is what I'm going to cover tonight with you. The misconception that surrounds the opening of a prison in a community, the reality of the economics, what really happens when a prison comes to town, or in this case, ICE comes to town, the reality of the employment situation in those communities where this is likely to happen, the effect on businesses in these communities. And then finally, we'll look at the cost to locals, the taxpayers, because whether you're getting a prison or ICE for the first time or reopening a defunct prison, there will be costs. And then we'll turn to the last plank on this, And this is how do we fight beyond the morality questions, which we've done a really good job of. How do we fight beyond these morality questions to challenge the economics? Because in certain communities like Walsenburg, and now turning to Hudson, there are a lot of questions about, well, what is the community actually going to get out of this? And we have mayors who think they're going to get an economic boon out of this. Without having a lot of data, they just assume they're going to get all of these benefits. Okay, let's address the misconception. The misconception is, quite frankly, that a lot of people out there think that automatically, if a prison or ICE comes to town and decides to open a defunct prison as a detention center, all of these jobs are going to automatically show up, all of these businesses are going to come to town, all of a sudden our property values are going to go up, we're going to have a big economic boom in our town. This is the misconception. I had this misconception. And then I signed up for a newsletter. Some of you may have this newsletter, the Marshall Report, that did a special segment on immigration. And I read in this email letter just 2 little sentences about how communities don't necessarily benefit from prisons being in the community. And I clicked on that, and pretty soon I was clicking on these articles and this body of evidence which spans 60 plus years, that indicates heavily that these economic benefits do not exist. Problem is, people don't know it. Okay, so if we look at this chart here, we have the mayor of Walsenburg saying in the first part of this quote, the morality part of the question is okay with him. He's pretty much holding his nose that, you know, he's given the government the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the right thing, that they've been empowered by law and they can do this, it's okay with him. The second part of this is the economic question. He admits that Walsenburg is one of these communities that's a small rural community that needs jobs. It needs the money flowing. How is he going to get it? ICE wants to come in. He thinks this is a slam dunk. He wants to go for it. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the situation is there's probably very little economic benefit. Okay, what does this body of evidence suggest? Research indicates there are slower growths for prison towns. In employment, there is no link between prisons and employment growth from 1990 onward. Unemployment rates for towns with prisons and without prisons were the same for prisons built in the 1990s and onward. Okay, to understand these 2 bullets, it's kind of important to understand the history of prisons in the United States. Prior to the 1980s, we did not have private prisons. They didn't exist in the United States. Then in the 90s and in the second part of the 90s, we had pretty fast growth in private prisons. And that's why you see this break in data. Before the 1990 point, there was a slight amount of growth attached to having a prison. But from about the mid-1990s, we didn't see that at all anymore. So we've got 30 plus years of not seeing any growth attached to having a prison. In addition, counties that have lower education levels have slower employment growth. And this is where probably Walsenburg is. Probably Hudson is here too. Towns that have prisons also have retail sales that are lower. Their wages are lower. There are also housing impacts. In a town that has a prison, there are fewer units of housing built in that kind of a town. The next 2 bullets, these will not shock anybody if you think about it. If you drill down on the specifics, this is not going to shock you. Home values and property values decline in neighborhoods near prisons. Who wants to live near a prison? Neighborhoods that are nearby prisons have a shift to lower economic households because those property values fall. No shocks there. What's the reality of the employment situation? Walsenburg's mayor thinks he's going to get a big job boom from this. Will he? Not likely. Jobs at new prisons generally go to people already in the system. Senior employees get first dibs. Not really shocking if you think about it. If you're going to open a business, or reopen a business for that matter, you're going to want to have your senior people be the ones on the ground to do that. You're going to want to have those skill sets. You're going to want to have that experience. You don't want to open something, with people who don't know what they're doing. So you're always going to want that. So Core Civic, Geo, they're going to go out through the company and they're going to say, who wants to go to these new places? Who wants to open these places? And somebody's going to raise their hand. So those jobs automatically will not go to these communities that want to reopen these ICE facilities. In addition, communities, these small rural communities with very small populations, often lack the skill sets that are required for the jobs. Walsenburg in particular, I saw recently an article, they had been attracting retirees. So their population weights towards the 55 and older crowd. How many people 55 and older want a job, have the skill set for the job, or want to retrain for the job? Older workforces have their own sorts of problems inherent in them. So you have to ask those kinds of questions. In addition, new corrections officers often will not move to the community. One study that was done in the California Corrections Department noted that prison employees would drive twice as far as other types of employees because they didn't live in the communities. So, we have that kind of thing going on, that either the talent isn't there or these kinds of people don't want to live in those communities. Hence, there are no gains in home ownership for these communities that are going to have prisons open or ICE detention centers open in their communities. There are no gains in voter registration. There are no gains in the tax base, and there are no gains in other civic investments. They just don't come. Okay, what are some of the effects on businesses? Research for the 60+ years indicates that prisons are a unique business model. They are not like opening a Walmart or opening a theater or opening an Amazon distribution point. Prisons are unique business entities. Therefore, prisons rarely spark a wave of business development because they are unique. Prisons are self-sustaining entities. They do their own food service, they do their own laundry, they do their own maintenance, they do a host of things unto themselves. Therefore, they do not link back into the community the way another business might. In addition, and Dorian spoke to this point, the point about prison or detainee labor. Prison labor or detainee labor can also crowd out local businesses and services because either detainee labor, prison labor, they work for such low wages or no wages, whatever the case may be. The prison will not look for those jobs out in the community, right? So there's no opportunity for those kinds of things to link into the community, like it would be for another kind of enterprise. All right, so we've looked at kind of why there won't be a boom necessarily associated with a prison or the reopening of an ICE facility. let's look at the cost that taxpayers might have to bear as a result of a prison or an ICE detention facility opening. A lot of this is front-weighted, where this happened the first time a prison opened. So because there's a misconception that a community will get a lot of economic benefits, communities often roll out the red carpet to get a prison to come to town. And some of the things they would get would be tax advantage financing, property tax abatements, infrastructure assistance in terms of like building roads or sharing cost of utilities or outright paying for utilities. All of these could be written into contracts that local communities would do with a prison or with an ICE facility, a detention center. There could also be tax exemptions. There could also be municipal services in terms of water, sewer, these kinds of things. We know specifically in Walsenburg that they built a larger sewer water system, and they did a bond issue there, and they're still paying that off. So we know that that one is part of Walsenburg's deal. And overall, 75% of private prisons receive some kind of developmental subsidy. Now, just because these are generally front-loaded things doesn't mean that ICE goes into a community to reopen a defunct prison and there aren't costs to be borne. There will be costs. There will be costs in Walsenburg. There will be costs in Hudson or any other place ICE around the country decides to open a defunct prison. Some of those things are probably like reconnecting the water, reconnecting the sewer, turning on the lights again. Are the roads, the county roads, up to snuff for, to bring in traffic into these facilities again? They may have to be repairing roads. They may have to be fixing lighting. All of those costs may be borne by the local community. The local community that thinks that they are going to get an economic boon out of this, when in fact, they are very likely not to get anything out of this. Okay, we've gone through a lot of economics so that we could actually get to this part of the presentation. And really, we've gone through all of this so that we could change the messaging, change the dynamics about how we're talking about these detention centers, these prisons being opened under the auspices of ICE, because we have fought on the morality grounds, but now we need to fight on challenging the economics. We need to challenge the messaging on signs, on flyers, on banners to better incorporate these economic ideas. So when we're doing things on signs, these short sort of statements will work. And then when we're doing flyers, maybe we're doing some of these, and then we're also citing source material, actual things that people can go look up on their own and, convince themselves. They don't have to necessarily just take our word for it. They actually have someplace they can go and look it up for themselves, some actual good sources. But some of the messaging, and this is not everything. One of the things I have seen about, the resistance community is that people are so very creative. It's just absolutely amazing to see the creative potential, that people bring to bear on all parts of this. But these are just some of my ideas. Totally not exhaustive. I mean, you're going to come up with much better things, I'm sure. But camps don't equal economic prosperity. Prison employees won't live in town. Who wants to live next to a prison? What business wants to build next to a prison? Towns with prisons have slower economic growth. Jobs go to senior contractor staff. Locals won't qualify for the jobs. Grow local business, not prison. Our future is in tourism, not prisons. Anything that's specific to the community that you can cite without, other than the prison would be a good thing to lean into. Okay, the next thing is overall the education planks. We have to really start educating people, because this is a very widely held misconception that, you know, when ICE comes to town, we're going to get stuff. We're going to really benefit economically. You know, we have to overcome this misconception. First, we have to educate ourselves. We in the activism community have to have the information so that we can talk to our friends, our neighbors, the people around us, and that we have good information. Secondly, there has to be some kind of focused outreach to the media sources out there who are covering topics like immigration, ICE, mass deportation. In every community throughout the United States that is facing these ICE reactivation of these prisons, there are reporters who are dedicated to these topics. We need to reach these people, because once we educate them, they will do our job for us. They will educate people. In addition, there's another, you know, avenue of trying to push back on, you know, the economic messaging that you know, this misconception that's out there. And there is room to fight this in the town hall. Now, this is probably best done with citizens who live in these communities. But, you know, pushing back on the mayors and the councilmen, the people who think that they're going to get these economic benefits, you know, holding them accountable. What specific things do they think they're going to get? And why do they think they're going to get them? Why do they think they're getting these jobs? Why do they think they're getting these incomes? Why do they think they're getting these tax benefits? And then what specific kinds of cost recovery are these towns going to go after? Because there are going to be costs borne by these communities. This is not a free deal. And if they're not going to get the economic benefits, they are certainly going to bear the economic costs. They are going to be asked to bear this in addition to having, you know, association with all the negative things, you know, the connotations of being the host of an ICE detention facility and all of the negative messaging that's going to get out, you know, associating their town with that kind of, you know, repression and terrible business. Okay, so I've covered quite a bit tonight, and I hope that we'll be able to, you know, discuss some more of this. The last thing I wanted to show you is the source page, where you can go for the articles to cite, more information if you want on the exact studies of where this information is coming for. And in addition, the very bottom there, I have put up another YouTube video of this presentation if you want, you know, something tonight or over the next couple of weeks, you know, that you can go back to and refer to. It's pretty clean. It's pretty much everything that I've covered tonight. And hopefully, you know, if you have questions, I'm here. I answer what I can. And back to you, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Laura. That is such amazing information. Could you please send me a copy of your slides, and then I can turn them into a link so that people can download them?
Sure thing.
That would be amazing. Yeah, lots of compliments for you. Morgan, did you see any questions that Dorian and Dana weren't able to answer?
I did not flag anything specifically, but certainly if anybody has questions, now is the time to ask. There is one. Dorian asked if you covered pilots. I don't know what that means, so I'm going to ask you to cover it.
Pilots?
Yeah, payment in lieu of taxes.
Oh. Yeah.
So there's a study that was done by the University of Pennsylvania that I'm like trying to find right now, and I'll put it in the chat, that talks about payments in lieu of taxes, pilots, and private prison companies will oftentimes come to an agreement with a county for payment in lieu of taxes.
I think your oxygen in there too.
It's one of the reasons why
Grabbing for air.
Huerfano Correctional Facility failed last time to produce profit, and why CoreCivic abandoned it. And if there's a facility opening in a county, we should be figuring out if it's getting pilots. if they're agreeing to any pilots, the payments in lieu of taxes,
Right.
because that is a huge economic risk for a community. And then when those prisons leave, it's just a cliff fall, you know?
Mm, yeah, okay.
Great presentation otherwise. I mean, great presentation, period. We should talk about pilots too. Awesome. I'm gonna get off my mic now.
How do people in Aurora, Colorado feel about the camp there? Speaking as someone in Aurora, Colorado, I don't like it. They have a weekly vigil for Jeanette every week, but it's not something I want in my neighborhood. And compared to how far away Hudson is, it's I mean, the one in Aurora is almost in the middle of a city. It's not far away from where a lot of other people are. But obviously I don't want it.
I'm just confirming the vigils are from 6 to 8 p.m. Is that right, Dana or Dorian? Yes, 6 to 8 p.m. At the Geo Detention Facility every Monday night. They are sponsored by different groups, and Solidarity Warriors is going to sponsor one here in the near future. Ginger, go ahead.
Oh, hi there. So I also go by Virginia, but I'm affiliated with Walsenburg. And I will say, because a lot of us have been attending the town halls, and I don't remember who exactly, if anyone's on this call from Walls, there was an official, might have been a councilman, who claimed that before with Core Civic, the city was getting paid for each prisoner. They were getting a certain amount of money from like a wilderness fund. And so that was one of the economic arguments. But I wonder if they did have some sort of pilots, because there is some issue where they have these bonds and there's a whole economic problem there. But that was one of the arguments, was that per population, per patient, sorry, I work in healthcare, per prisoner, they were getting funds. And then my thought was, not for illegally detained immigrants. You are not going to get funds per head. So I don't know if any of you can speak to that or
I do
have
believe
heard of that.
I do believe that they will get some kind of
Okay.
If they
Okay.
negotiate.
yeah, if it's a negotiated thing. So
Okay.
That would probably be in lieu of taxes.
Yeah.
So I think it
Okay.
is probably a pilot's thing.
Yes, and I could just see this sort of mayor, which I hope he gets voted out, doing sort of a Tom Homan thing.
Okay.
Just yeah. Anyway, thank you both. That was really informative. I appreciate all the work that you all are doing.
And I linked that study. It was by Good Jobs First. I ended up having to use ChatGPT to find it, but I found it.
I'll also send a link to an study, or no, I'm sorry, article that the ACLU put out back in 2017 about the deaths and mistreatment of immigrants in detention facilities. Way back in 2017, 31 immigrants had died in ICE custody. Dee, go ahead.
Hey, Virginia, this is Dee. I didn't know that you were on the call, and apparently you didn't know that I was on either. John Galusha was the one who spoke to that they got so much per inmate. And just an FYI, Gary Visani's running unopposed, so he will be in another term.
Oh. Oh no. Well, thank you. Yeah, I've been driving, so I didn't even have a chance to look to see who was on the call. So Carmen's not going to run.
No, she withdrew immediately. She thought about it a couple of days and decided not to, but yeah.
So a couple of days. Oh no. Ah. Well, thanks
Ginger,
for
did you still
mentioning
have
who it
a,
was. And
all right. Are there any other questions for Laura or Dorian or any comments?
Looks like Dana's.
Dana?
You're muted.
You're on mute, Dana.
Sorry. Okay, so May Sandoval, who just spoke, is highlighted in this article that I've just put in the chat. It's a Mother Jones article, very interesting about whether the detention center would be a godsend or not. And D is highlighted in that. It's quite an interesting article if you'd like to read it. Plus, Mother Jones was an actual character in the history of the mining in Walsenburg. So it's a very interesting article. So check it out, and you'll see a great picture of D on the front of their article. So wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. I'll make sure to send out a link to that article in the email tomorrow as well.
Great.
Yes, you have a point, iPhone. We are all immigrants. All right. Ruth, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ruth, and I live in Golden. And I'm just wondering, the private prisons, I've been looking up, there are 22 states that don't have private prisons. And and it's sort of surprising with as blue as Colorado is that we have them. Is there a push to try to get private prisons outlawed or turned back over to the state?
There was at one point. I'm not sure who that question was to, but there was an effort at one point for Colorado to push back against private prison contracts. I'm not sure why that's changed. I guess because they're federal contracts versus state contracts, and so there's a lot more effort involved in the prevention of them because of something called qualified immunity or derivative qualified immunity. So anything that you can't sue the federal government for, you can't sue a federal contractor for. That's where a lot of those problems come in.
So
I didn't even know that.
I don't understand that. Can you explain that qualified immunity?
Yeah, derivative qualified immunity. So it's a legal term that basically means that if you can't sue the federal government for something, then you can't sue someone who's acting on behalf of the federal government at their orders, is an employee of the federal government for something.
So then if a private prison
Mhm.
is mistreating people, we can't sue them because they are a contractor of the federal government? Is that what you're saying?
Unless unless it's something that you could sue the federal government for doing.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where there's leeway there. So you could sue the federal government for things. Like ACLU sued ICE to get information on where they were planning new infrastructure. But preventing them from doing things can oftentimes be very difficult because of that derivative qualified immunity. You have to say that they violated some law that the federal government can't violate.
So, well, and I presume that the federal government is not allowed to rape its detainees.
I would assume.
As they did in Tennessee.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think that we need to hold our elected officials to heel on this so that they can do whatever they need, whatever they can do. But getting a response from even our governor has been impossible.
So
we need everybody to be talking.
Okay, so we have some state detention centers that are privately run. Does the fact that we have state detention centers, does that open the doorway for the federal detention centers to be privately run?
It really depends, I feel like, if you, how you're attacking these things. There's some legislation that's been drafted by people within our research team on just our Discord server for no concentration camps in Colorado. And there's some people on there who are well versed in drafting legislation. And so they've drafted some that focuses on material assistance to these private detention centers. So being able to impose civil liability for providing material assistance to like a company that is doing bad things. And that's worded a lot better in their draft.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Is there any way I could get a copy of that draft legislation?
Absolutely. Let me get it for you right now and put it in the chat. It's publicly hosted, so.
Super, thanks.
Yep.
I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Dorian, is there a way for people in this meeting to get invited to the
Discord?
No Concentration Camps Discord?
Why don't I just I'll just throw the link to the Discord in the chat.
That would be awesome.
Doesn't bother me at all.
And Tiffany, somebody asked about being a court monitor and how do they get involved in that?
Okay, let me put those links in the chat.
And one more thing.
So yes, someone did ask, can I go to immigration court and video ICE? Would that help immigrants? What you actually want to do is go through the Court Watch program. So they will teach you how to be an observer. The application that you need to fill out is going to ask you to state who you know in your organization. So you can use my name, which is Tiffany, and my email, which I'll put in the chat. And then the link there that says volunteer for Court Watch. Go ahead and click on that link and fill out that form, and then someone will be in contact with you. Dorian, you said you need help administrating the Discord.
Call to action, baby. Please help me.
Yeah.
We love giving volunteers something to do. So that's
Yeah.
what we're all about. If you want to,
We need someone to run our Instagram too.
Yeah, we do too.
Fair.
I'll put a link to the nocampscolorado.org contact us form in the chat. So I would fill that out if you are able to help out Dorian and the crew with adminning the Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of something to do, many of you may have heard me say many times before that calling your legislator may not be the best use of your time and effort. But if you want to call any Colorado legislators, state house, state senators, governors, who might be able to introduce legislation to ban for-profit prisons in the state, that's a good idea, and I would encourage you to do it. There is no legislation pending, there is no idea there, but if you start planting the seed and enough people start calling, it may get somewhere, and people may get involved and may get behind it and may become a movement. In addition to that, I just want to give a little anecdote from my own life. Way back in the day, I lived in a small town in upstate New York that had 22,000 people and falling, like free falling, and was in danger of really dissolving altogether. And they were very lucky that a second prison and a Westinghouse factory came along to save the town. But the reality is, really, not only did nothing change, the town really was worse off after building the prison, because it takes a lot of land that they're not getting property taxes on for most of it. And like Laura was talking about, the jobs never materialized. People didn't want to live there when they could just, move 30 or 60 minutes down the road to a town that didn't have prisons in it. And, what she is talking about hypothetically, or theoretically, I should say, I've seen real firsthand that it really doesn't help these communities that are already, in difficult situations. help them out. It's not the life preserver that Walsenburg and Hudson think they're going to be. And like I said earlier, if they're going to be taking detainees and just releasing them out into the community, well, now those cities are responsible for housing them, feeding them, if they become homeless, whatever, in addition to the costs and tax revenue that they're losing from these for-profit prisons.
There are a lot of questions about like what actions can I take. I'm going to send out a bunch of links for things like volunteering, options for calling representatives and things like that in the email tomorrow. You should get that by tomorrow evening. I'm actually, some of you know, I'm interning as a paralegal with an immigration attorney this semester. I graduate in December, but he has invited me to go with him to attend court hearings inside the GEO facility in Aurora tomorrow morning. So I will be busy in the morning, but I will get that email out to you guys as soon as I can tomorrow. Dee, go ahead.
This question is for Morgan. So, Morgan, did you just say that, and this is how naive I am. So at these concentration camps, they do release the detainees into the communities where they're at when they're with whatever?
I was at a meeting with a reliable source that I can't name at the moment. But basically what he said is at the Hudson facility, the detention facility that they're looking to open up, they will be bringing detainees from all over the country to be detained there pending their hearings. If their hearings come out that they are found to be in the country legally and not deportable, and they are free to go, they will open the detention center doors and let them out. Period. Full stop. That's it.
Wow. Good to know.
Yeah. And, I think if you're going to be taking somebody from their home and their job and their family, the least you can do is return them to where they came from. But that's not what they're proposing, and that's not what they're talking about having happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's an organization called Casa de Paz. They are right across the street from GEO. They help detainees when they do get released, sometimes in the middle of the night. They provide them with clothing, toiletries, a place to stay. They even help with flights back to their home country sometimes. I'm going to put a link to their donation page in the chat here in 1 second. Any other questions, comments while I'm doing that? TL, I see that you volunteered with social media. So if you could shoot me an email, I'll put my email in the chat here. That would be amazing. We could really use the help with our social media. Deborah, you asked, do you think they're going to let anyone go? I think, to my knowledge, most people are being deported. I think those that are able to get an attorney obviously stand a better chance of being released at some point. But there are not enough immigration attorneys to go around. There are not enough immigration judges. I believe the Trump administration just reassigned a bunch of military judges to be immigration court judges now. Like, oh, you don't need to actually know anything about immigration law to be a judge. Of course. The attorney that I work with, I'm going to put his contact info in the chat as well. He has so many pro bono cases that he's working right now that he can't do any more pro bono work, but he is doing what he refers to as low bono work, so low cost immigration legal services. So if you know someone that is in need of an immigration attorney, please give him a call. He is an amazing human being whose heart is in the right place, and he will speak with people about loved ones they may have that are being detained and answer questions for them, go over a brief summary of their case, and he does that for free. He thinks it's immoral to charge consultation fees for that. So I'm going to put the link to donate to Casa de Paz, and then I'll grab his contact info.
That's a good question, Kathy. Tiffany, do you know if somebody can volunteer to help your lawyer?
So you would need legal training, like if you are trained as a paralegal or a legal assistant, and you want to volunteer, he may be able to use that help. I can definitely ask him if that is something that you have training to do. I'll put my email in the chat again here. And again, if you receive an email asking for donations for a family who's had someone kidnapped by ICE, please forward those to the email that I'm putting in the chat now, which is immigrantjustice@solidaritywarriors.org. And we will make a donation. All right, I'm gonna grab my attorney's info real quick. His name is Jose Rosales, and I will put that in the chat. Any other questions or comments before we call it a night? All right, well, you are all wonderful, especially Laura and Dorian. Thank you so much for presenting tonight, and I will get you all this information tomorrow. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.